So as we move into week 4, we're going to veer off and talk about staffing and volunteer issues. Chapter 9 in your text summarizes these two concepts. It's a lot of information in one chapter. I would have preferred that they had been separated, but nevertheless, they are one and the same. So I wanted to highlight for you some of the points that I think are important to take note of. So the first thing is there's a lot of studies at the beginning of this chapter about different ways that people have looked at the nonprofit sector and working and managing in it, and what are some of the motivations. And I think the end result is that the conclusion is that there are mixed reasons why people are motivated to work in the sector, and what brings them to it, what helps them succeed. But it could be, a lot of folks think it's because the cause. It's not always the cause. People think it's not the money, but as nonprofits have gotten more competitive, sometimes the money does motivate. It could be the feeling, it could be the purpose, it could be the mission. There's a lot of different reasons that people come to work in the nonprofit sector. As far as managing human behavior in public and nonprofits, it's not too different from any other sector, in my opinion, except that you have the added benefit of having a mission and having a cause. So what we talk about when we look at how to manage folks in this sector, your text looks at, first of all, being reflective and proactive regarding your own self-motivation. What motivates you, and what can you draw on? What is your own psychological needs that are being met by working in the sector? Recognizing that what motivates you may not motivate others, so you have to go out and find what is propelling folks to do well. When we talk about leadership, we'll get more into this. Having realistic expectations always work, and I'm going to have some other slides that we'll talk about in a minute here that I think illustrate some of these concepts even more. Clear and challenging goals is important. Having things that are doable, that people can really relate to. Thinking about rewards, and that's not always money. I found out a long time ago that sometimes you could reward by giving people flexible work schedules, enabling them to take care of their family needs, especially in my case where we're a family service agency. How could we not be conscious of and help with the family needs of our employees? Being honest regarding the rewards, what you can and can't do. Equitable and fair treatment, and I always find this to be really important for employees. They don't always expect the manager leader to be right, but they do expect them to be equitable and fair. Creating satisfying and meaningful work. People do come to work into the sector because they want to help others as an initial motivator, and so I think it is the job of management and the organization to make sure that the work remains meaningful. And finally, being aware of life stages. So people are in different places. I have a very interesting situation where I have a very young workforce in our child care centers, young women, mostly Latina, also of childbearing age and starting their own families. And then I have much older people who have been with me. I've been there 31 years. I have quite a few people who have been there more than 20 years. They are at a different point in life, and understanding that and trying to help folks adapt to that, and adapting your own leadership and management style to that is really important. The chapter also veers off and talks about managing volunteers. It talks about the enormous impact of volunteers in our country, volunteerism is a very unique and embedded concept in our culture, and there's a lot of people who volunteer. That $20.25 is actually more now. It's about $25 is the numbers I've seen lately. The Points of Light Foundation does a good job each year quantifying how much a volunteer hour of service is worth. And this isn't just along the lines of minimum wage, but it's all the cost you would have if you tried to replace that volunteer. In my own agency, we have almost 100,000 hours of service each year. That is the equivalent of 50 employees of almost $2 million that we would have to go and find to replace the volunteers in order to do the services. Different types of volunteers. There's the spot volunteer, which the newer generations, Generation X and Y, the millennials kind of like. They like to come out for one thing. They are not long-term volunteers. Like the seniors that I have in our senior centers or delivering home delivered meals. In some cases, we have 90-year-olds delivering meals to 70-year-olds. These are people who are regular volunteers who engage over a very long period of time. And then there's the pressured volunteer, which is kind of like the court-ordered volunteer. You have to do community service. We work with that type of volunteer as well. That's a whole other different set of challenges. Volunteer motivation hopefully is about the mission. You know, even if they are pressured volunteers, that when we interview them, we want to make sure they have a connection to what we do. Volunteer practices in general, yes, you treat them like employees, but not exactly, because they don't have to be there. And they're not there for a paycheck. But at the same time, you do want to have standards, but not standards that get you in trouble in terms of maybe causing a workers' compensation entitlement should they get injured on the job. They have to be managed. The days of people just volunteering for a nonprofit and doing what they like really doesn't work in the type of intense pressure that we're under in these organizations to perform. And just like with employees, having clear goals and expectations is always a good practice. And evaluating them. We evaluate volunteers the way we evaluate employees. The form's a little different, but the concepts are the same. We give them a 3-month evaluation, 6-month, and then each year. Drucker has some concepts which I really like, and that is in the nonprofit sector, we don't make widgets. We don't have a product that we put out for sale. We're only as good as our people, and it's the only control you have. So who you hire, where you place them, who you promote are very important. Developing people is important. How do you develop them? By building on their strengths, by mentoring, by teaching, by being an encourager. And remember that at the heart of it is the cause. Important concepts in our settings, team is important. Understanding the job, explaining to folks what's expected of them, demanding that people educate the boss. That means that you don't know everything as the manager, and others have to speak up, and looking for competency and people who want to have a future. Tom Peters has another interesting way about how you empower people on the job, which I like to use as a template. 5 supports. Well, after you involve everyone in everything and you use self-managing team, you see the 5 supports and the 5 inhibitors. Reduce the structure, flat structures, reconceive the middle manager's role. The middle manager is there to support and eliminate the bureaucracies. These are my some of my top issues in building a good management team in a nonprofit sector. Selecting carefully. Once you select them, they're yours. You have to deal with it. Educating, constant training, continuous learning. Even after you get your degree, you're going to find that you're going to need to go for continuous learning. Creating the culture, and I'll show in a minute what my values are in my culture. Place for passion, promote risk-taking, build teams, and plan for the future. This is how I like to look at staffing issues. Here's the values that I use. So I participate in all the orientation of new workers in my agency. And I go to talk about the mission and to talk about the values that should guide people's work efforts. And I say very clearly in those sessions that I know they have job descriptions, I know they're being told what their tasks are, but what I'm interested in is whether or not they have the value system that fits with our culture and which will make them successful. And these are not foreign, you've probably seen these in other contexts. Taking ownership, understanding the client comes first, understanding that nonprofits exist in the context of community and must relate to that. Communication that's open and truthful, people who can talk to one another, constructively criticize. Problem solvers, probably the biggest talent and skill that people need to have when you're dealing with so many different types of people issues. Having a dynamic and hopeful vision and having dignity and honesty about what you're doing. If you've got those core values, not just in my organization, but in the sector and in work in general, you're going to be successful. Finally, in terms of volunteers, this is just some material that we use to engage volunteers and to get them to understand that they're partners, but yet that they have responsibilities, that this just isn't something that you show up for and hang out and put in the hours. Even if you are that pressure type of volunteer, you have to take responsibilities, and these are some of the values we look for in volunteers. We have a whole packet that they have to sign out onto. This is a Bill of Rights for volunteers, which comes from the National Organization on Volunteerism. I think it might be from the Points of Light. The rights that they have to be treated as a co-worker, suitable assignments, know about the organization. So you have to orient volunteers as well. A place to work, a good match, a right to be heard, that they can speak up and be supported for it. So this is just a very quick run through. Usually it takes a couple of hours to teach this and provide the backup examples of what these point to. But I think you get the gist of it, and if you read the chapter, you'll certainly get a good flavor of some of the concepts that guide managing staff and volunteers in nonprofit organizations.